something like lots of death by PowerPoint. I think it's so funny how I was listening to a podcast last night, and someone pointed out how funny it is, how quickly we all seem to have kind of adapted to this, like the existence of these sort of large language models. In I'll just ask ChatGPT. Who's used ChatGPT or similar? Most. Okay, yeah. So another. You realise how significant this is. It's a like incredibly profound thing for many reasons. And actually, one of the sort of questions, you look at how different technologies have led to different revolutions, different profound changes in the way we organise ourselves, the way we live our lives. You sort of say, well, the steam engine leading to the Industrial Revolution and the sort of profound changes within that. But fundamentally, the bedrock of that is like, how does production change? And then you sort of think, well, okay, well, sort of, what did the Internet revolution do? I suppose it's fundamentally democratized sort of access to information for good and for ill. And I suppose you sort of think, well, what did the mobile technology revolution becoming more frequently, what did that do? I suppose one way of perceiving that is the revolution or democratized or increased access to content creation and sharing. And I guess the question for this, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be a more profound revolution than those two put together. What is the fundamental stuff of this? What is the thing that's going to, like, the underlying thing that's going to change the most? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't think. The worrying thing is I don't think anybody does. I don't think there's a really good conception of that yet. I would take a punt at it will democratize sense making sense of the world, synthesizing information and presenting it in a way that's real and tangible and helpful. One of the things that you could say about the internet revolution and the revolution in mobile technology and content creation is it's left us absolutely deluged with information, in a space of almost like cognitive overload, where we've got all of this data, all of this information, all of these different opinions and perspectives vying for our information. And I guess our question is, in that world, do we narrow ourselves down? Do we shut out all of that and become sort of isolated and focused on one thing, or just listen to my little clique, my little group? Well, I think we've seen that that's a societal change that's been happening over the last few years. Or do I just open myself up and embrace the chaos and try and pick my way through it? And I think one of the things you might say about AI is it gives us an opportunity to not have to take either of those strategies, for me to be able to tell it what my values are, what I'm trying to achieve, where I'm going, and it can do the job of sifting and giving the information that align with my personal and my organisational priorities. And I think that's my conception of how this can sort of play out. With that frame of mind, I suppose it's helpful just to come back to that diagram I used at the start today about, we want to reach everybody with great PD, but how do we do that? Maybe I wasn't as clear as I should have been this morning. We know that being able to provide someone with highly personalised feedback is vital. We know that we need to have an intimate knowledge of where they are so that I can provide them with a next step that connects with their prior knowledge. We know that sort of personalisation matters, but of course at the moment the way that personalisation is occurring is through a human in a one-to-one or one-to-a-few relationship, and that makes it very, very costly if you want to scale up a powerful, an effective learning program. Whereas, so what we do when we want to do something at scale in learning is we cut that adaptability down, we focus on a narrower curriculum, and that keeps costs down and allows us to reach a lot of people. with varying outcomes. So, can AI change this dynamic? And I think one of the things I was, thinking about today is it inverts it almost completely. Let's assume that the feedback is good that you're getting. Let's assume that its knowledge of you and what it thinks you need to do next is accurate and correct. Let's just assume that. In that scenario, the more you use it, the cheaper it is. It completely changes this cost dynamic, meaning that theoretically you can have, as a teacher, every teacher could have a personalised coach that could follow them through their career, could respond to their priorities, could, it's like, I don't know how to conceive it. An angel on your shoulder is the really positive perspective on something like that. So just sort of zip through here. This is Lena from earlier, and this is. I don't know how far away this is, if I'm honest. There are elements of this that are really, really like on the verge. We can do fairly shortly, but other elements that are a bit further away. But I just wanted a sort of scope set, just try and get a sense of like what this could actually mean when you translate it into a professional learning experience. So, Lena, teaching a lesson, end of the day, little notification on her phone. She's been working on pacing, clarity, wait time, all these sort of things, and she's really pleased that those things seem to be in the green. That's all good. But she has been recording her lessons, and the AI has been analysing them and identified there's an issue on a number of occasions in the lesson with some of the students exhibiting cognitive overload. And so it asks her, would you like to learn a little bit more about that? Would you like to understand that situation a little bit more? And so what it does is it shows her in her lesson when those moments happen and why it came to that judgment, why it felt that maybe there were, the element of interactivity at this point was extremely high. And from what I saw before, the learners were relative novices in this domain, etc. And says, well, one thing you could do is consider using a worked example. Would you like to see an example of one of those? And then prompts a worked example. It then says, next day, would you like to take that further? Do you want to engage in a cycle of learning around this? And she's being asked, do you want to work just with me? Do you want me to connect you with an instructional coach? Do you want me to connect you with a community of practice, potentially anywhere in the world, focused on works examples and cognitive load theory? So over the course of the next few days, she gets, at times when she's not busy, because it kind of knows her schedule, a little reminder, little vignettes, little animated overviews of some of the key facets of cognitive load theory and examples of worked examples. It will bring her together, connect. Everyone comes together to discuss what they've read, and it's being facilitated by the CPD coordinator at school, who's getting little facilitation prompts from the AI herself. So she doesn't have to be the world's greatest coach or presenter. She's getting some support as well. So the next thing that happens is that Lena might engage in a series of scenarios. So the AI says, okay, well, let me give you an example of where you might use a worked example. This is the situation, this is the class, this is the topic. What are you going to do? How are you going to go about doing that? And it's going to interact with her like a learner in that context might. So she gets to trial out and try some of the strategies that are being advocated. Next, she might rehearse it in front of the screen. And again, the AI might pick out certain elements that can be refined or things that are going well and give her feedback on her timeline about what she may or may not do differently. Finally, she might go, okay, I'm going to try that in the classroom now. And as she does, she's getting little prompts and little reminders to use a particular strategy at a particular time, and to remember to recap and to remember to do all these sort of things. And then obviously the other part of this is that, you know, she could again get some feedback to read at the end of the lesson and a certificate of progress. And interestingly, okay, this is, I'm just out there, across the whole school, there could be these different strategies that are being supported by the AI. And the AI can measure if they're actually working. Is our sort of focus on worked examples across the school actually leading to impact, or is it not? So we sort of envision a scenario where that AI, remember sort of talking about that personal assistant that could like take on your values. Well, it could be taking on the teacher's values and goals. It could be taking on the school priorities and aggregating that. And it could be taking on aspects of the PD curriculum that she might be working towards and generating, as a result, recommendations, feedback, frameworks, all of these sort of things. So, yeah, that's the one potential way that you could start embodying the use, or multiple potential ways that you could start embodying the use of artificial intelligence in professional development. That doesn't mean we're going to, doesn't mean we're going to do all of those things, but the reality is that someone will, and more importantly, that's a very positive framing of all of those different capabilities, isn't it? That's all very, very teacher-centric, teacher-focused. There's a lot of autonomy in that scenario. Someone will also build a tech that isn't that has other potential. So the reason that we feel like this conversation is so important is that teachers have to own this conversation now. We have to step up and start saying, no, that is what we accept, that's what we work with, I'd embrace that, no, not that. So anyway, that's one of the things I just wanted to help frame the day, that's a very positive interpretation of where we can go with AI, but it's the Wild West out there in terms of the capabilities that technology is emerging and developing all the time, and some people will implement it differently from that. So, conversation starter.
Yeah, I think a really good point. I think obviously AI is in the headlines generally and in schools as well, talking about how students use AI, how it might be able to help you plan a lesson. We're not talking about AI in something that's really fundamentally important to teachers, the PD that they receive and the sorts of management that they receive. And you know, there are many professions around the world who are sort of quite unionized about the approaches to how that's going to engage with their profession, and we just haven't picked up that much around professional development space. I think it's really important that dialogue starts. What I will do is just to frame this a little bit more with regards to what we're doing with AI, because of course we are doing things with it, is show you a little bit about what we're doing and the way that we're starting to implement it, and kind of things that will be available through the AI the Access program. So, how many Iris Connect users have we got in the room? Fair number. Okay. So, broadly speaking, some of you are probably familiar with the idea of the forms tool that's in the system, the idea that you can construct your own rubrics and you can bring those into a video reflection, and then you can link the video to answers in your rubric, multiple choice questions, text questions, that sort of thing. One of the things that we wanted to do in the initial stages of looking at AI is to create the most flexible tool that we possibly could, so that people could help us understand the ways in which they will use AI to help analyse the lessons. And also we wanted to bring in some kind of structure so that you can analyse that data. And so we started with the idea of amending what was the existing forms tool in the platform. It already allows you to create a list of questions and apply that to a video reflection. And we also have tools to be able to download CSV files or visualize graphs. So it seemed like a really good place to start with. So that's what we've done. I'm just going to explain how that works, really, without trying to influence too much the conversations you're going to be having at your tables about maybe what it should be used for. But if I go into AI Insights, the name may change, I don't know. We always have a fancy name for something to start with and maybe change it a little bit later on. But AI Insights, this is essentially the forms area of the platform where you can build your rubrics. And and I'm going to hit create quickly. And this is the little rubric building tool. I'm just going to give it a name of AI demo. And I'm going to turn the AI on. And then we can choose to ask a list of text questions, multiple choice questions, rating scales, counters, and timers, and reorder this list. And then we can ask the AI to answer it about a particular video in our reflections library to a lesser or greater degree of accuracy. We're working with AI, just like you're working with ChatGPT. We're not guaranteeing that this is perfect and it's going to give you the perfect response. That's why it's going to be an early access program to allow people to play with that and give us feedback about how it's working.
It's very, like, I would say that with like non-interpretive things, like how many open questions were in this lesson? Spot on, every time. So I mean, it's really able to do that kind of stuff. Other things just.
It can be insightful. You can ask it to, anyway, we'll get into it. But so, has anyone got an idea of a question they would like to ask about the lesson? Could be anything. I'll just ask for an overview of the lesson if you'd like to sort of demonstrate how it works.
Could it, I think this is probably no, could it map like how many different pupils were involved, or is it not good?
Maybe.
It might be able to.
It might be able to. So one of the things to say about the way that we're doing it at the moment is that for each lesson that's recorded, then we enter into an AI process. We're taking the transcript of that lesson and allowing the AI to analyse the transcript. And because that's the way that large language models are trained, it's surprising how much insight in terms of who is speaking, etc., that it's able to get. But because it's working from the transcript currently and not the video, distinguishing between different, it definitely is able to say teacher talking because it picks up on the tone of voice and what they're doing between teacher and pupil. Between different pupils, we could ask it, but this is, these are the sorts of things we want to know. Probably spot a recurring conversation with a particular individual, but we would have to see. Well, I'll just start off. I mean, we can play with this more later on anyway, but I just wanted to give a sample. So I'm just going to ask it through a simple text question to so I'm not used to your keyboard. So just like building a normal form, I'm going to name the question. I could give questions instructions for the human being, or I can provide AI instructions too. I'm just going to ask it to describe the lesson. We'll look at some more complicated ones in a second. I'm just going to save that one question form, go back, and here's our AI demo form. I'm going to hit the button, and I'm going to ask it to analyze a reflection. We've got our question over here, which is just description. I click on this button and see the reflections that are in my library. I'm going to choose the primary science lesson. This is a tech demo, so
who knows?
We shall see. We shall see. And also, it's got a fair job to do in a sec. But yes, in essence, now what's happened behind the scenes here is we've asked a large language model AI, after having provided it with the transcript of the lesson, that question.
Anonymised transcript as well. That's the other key thing.
Yes, it does.
There's no personal data being shared at all. Just the transcript with names and all personal information redacted.
That's it. So the video of the students is not actually being shared with the AI. This is the transcript of the lesson. And all names. Yes.
Of course.
Oh
Dear. I don't know, man. Like, do you want to style it out, or do you want?
Yeah, I'm going to go again.
Is the transcript of that lesson then added to the database?
Yes, it is. Yes. Because it also then provides captions, so you can choose between caption tracks as well.
Added to the LLM?
No.
Okay.
No.
So there's no learning mode.
It's not. No. It's not. It's not using that data for its own
subsequent learning.
Yes. No. It's literally just insane.
No.
Yeah, but show what.
No, that's fine. I did ask the team to update to the very latest stuff this morning, which is probably
a bad idea.
Massive error. But anyway, I'd already I baked some earlier on. So here are some ones that I created earlier. An interesting example of just looking and asking it to dig down on questioning in a couple of different lessons. And I actually deliberately picked a couple of, these are staged lessons, by the way. This isn't real teacher practice. This is stuff I've found on YouTube and stuff I've deliberately staged some poor practice around questioning, where I just asked it things that might be interesting if we're analysing questioning. So could it give us a questioning breakdown of the different questions that were asked, what time they happened in the lesson, what question type were they? Were they open or closed? And what was the wait time after questioning? At the moment, we're not asking for it to provide any sort of judgment about the quality of practice. We're simply asking it to equip us with some of the tools to look at it. And I think that may be one of the ways that we look at this, is a tool to facilitate that coaching or self-reflection experience. Without spending an hour watching that video, can it tell you how many open questions or closed questions you asked? What else did we ask it to do? We did ask it, just to test it out, what it felt was the quality of questioning on a rating scale in here. And then I asked it to justify why it rated it in such a way, which it's come back and said that it felt that it was generally effective, as evidenced by a variety of open questions, encouraged student participation and thinking. So that was one insight around questioning. Another one we did, we asked it to look at sort of cognitive load, and again, it gave a breakdown of the table of the different phases of the lesson, the times those phases happened, whether the cognitive load was high or low, and then I asked it to justify why it felt cognitive load was high or low in those phases. Again, when we looked at it, it's actually not far off what quite a few of the educators would have agreed with, but, you know.
There's a really fascinating one. We've got a video that's sort of a teacher using quite a dialogic strategy in a mathematics context. It's really interesting. And what she does is she engages the kids in a justify a true, defend true, defend false, as a thing, and gets a conversation going. And it's really funny because you can look at it through the lens of this cognitive load analysis. There's a lot going on behind the scenes to sort of prep it to be thinking in those sort of ways. I say thinking, or whatever. And anyway, what's interesting is it pulls out the same objection or concern about that lesson that trained human observers do. It picks out that there's a really long sort of dialogic phase with one learner, and there's off-topic conversations happening in that time. And it's like, oh, okay, it is getting to the point where it's making helpful and similar analyses to us.
I'm a sort of relative skeptic, by the way. I mean, we've been wanting to use AI for years and years and years at IRIS, especially whenever we were demoing forms to people for years, people would always be like, oh, these fill themselves in. But the forms don't fill themselves in now. Now they can. We've been waiting for a long time, but I've never felt the accuracy is there. A few years ago, the results would bring out just wild in terms of what it would suggest. The moment that really struck me is when we were doing some analysis around some lessons that have been recorded, and we're involved in a research project in the US that looked at a lot of pre-kindergarten, so nursery level lessons marked on the class framework, which is a really, really well established tool for being able to sort of look at the practice in the classroom. And we had, therefore, access to a lot of videos and permission to look at those, and they'd already been pre-scored and double-scored by human observers. Now, the very first time we threw the AI looking at the same videos, it was within a ballpark. We then went into those AI instructions and started to help guide it a little bit more, telling it to look at certain things, and this is what human scores were on average in these areas. And by the end of maybe less than a day's effort, we had it scoring as close as the humans were in terms of the interreliability. There's obviously a variation between double scoring with humans. It was scoring in the sort of 8 domains of class in the same space, which was a bit of a moment for me. I was like, well, I'm not saying that they should start getting marked by a class, but I also understand that process of observing those classrooms. There was a project with about 5,000 classrooms, probably cost about $10 million, and we were doing that scoring in 10 seconds within the same level of accuracy as humans, which was a pretty profound moment.
So anyway, let's round it off and just show the fact that one of the things that what does this potentially look like in one of the early iterations in a sort of practical way? Well, what if you don't know what you might best focus on as a teacher? You've been teaching for a while, and you go, okay, where should I direct my attention? Well, we wondered if we could build like a little diagnostic tool that would make a recommendation about where you would gainfully focus your energy. And this one looks at a range of domains. They happen to be aligned with our pathways on the platform, the different things that you can do on the platform. And it's going through and making some broad judgments here, that was not and then summarising and making a recommendation about why it thinks you should focus on questioning through a self-reflective pathway, and then takes you there and allows you to engage in one of those.
Right.
So,
have you done some work on the language that justification, because even within that scaling, you don't want to, it says poor, questioning or disorganised, and then that recommendation, I only saw it briefly, but you need to teach it
That's
to be...
because there's my test videos that I've called that, by the way.
Okay.
So I can distinguish, we're trying to work how accurate it is, so I've got some videos where the question is not good.
Yeah.
That's some other videos, so I'm putting them in there and seeing if it's picking up on that. But yeah, I mean, all of the sort of ratings and scales are changeable by you as a human. You can say, I want this scale to be from poor to outstanding, all the way through.
But the recommendation that it generated, you've done some work around like what values about.
exactly. So there's like master prompts that you can put in alongside the main prompt, which is always be respectful, deliver feedback in a similar way, and obviously that's all craftable and refinable over time to meet with what we would expect in terms of how we would interact. Yeah.
And have you found that to be kind of focused on the surface level features of what it sees in classrooms versus the active ingredient of the technique you're asking them?
It all depends on the prompt. This is if you ask it to that superficial surface level things, it will report on it. And one of the things that we're finding is that, so for example, for the cognitive load analysis, you have to do quite a lot of additional prompt work. You have to start saying, well, your response will be, aligned with the, feed it, swellers, work, all this sort of stuff to give it some context. And then you say, what your job is to, estimate the existing prior knowledge of the learners based on their responses to questions early in the lesson, and then you need to sort of be looking at the element interactivity of the intrinsic. And then once you've gone through all of these sorts of stages, it starts being able to give you scenarios where identify moments where, for example, the teacher has increased the intrinsic load, and then there's extraneous. The teacher unintentionally increased the extraneous load through their instruction. So it's able to do stuff like that, but you have to prompt it.
And that begs the question around, obviously, with all AI tools, there's a garbage in, garbage out sort of system that exists and the human in the loop. And outside of obviously the platform itself, there's an inherent risk of the user that's feeding into that system not being fair and transparent with its prompting, and therefore ending up with a teacher potentially receiving feedback that may not necessarily be. So
I'd say it's my favourite. Put this in someone's hands.
Yeah,
Someone's
like
putting
I'm
an
pro
awful
AI,
prompt.
I'm pro AI,
You're an
but-
awful teacher is the feedback.
Yeah, because the information has been fed in to make a judgment. Because in theory, we can skirt around as much as we want, but invariably there are some schools who might look at this as a way to make a judgment on a teacher's out.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, you have the European Union are going to introduce legislation around the use of AI specifically in HR matters.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if our government's going to follow suit. Probably not. So
In 5 years, they will.
right. Yeah. So this is an urgent, profession-wide thing where the conversation needs to happen, and I don't see much evidence of it happening within the unions and elsewhere. But it needs to go. What is the area where this is okay, and where is it cross the line?
Yeah, and that's my question, and then and probably my cynicism as such around what's Iris Connect's position in that, because obviously if you're creating a system that enables that to happen, there is that kind of finger pointing that then happens where people go, well, I use the system that I was told to use, and
Well, this is part of the idea of the early access program. Is we're not just going to launch this tool and say, enjoy it. We also respect teachers as professionals.
One of the things
that are engaging with AI in lots of walks of life too. You should be learning more about the dangers of it if you're going to be using it to grade student work or give feedback to students. We're just as much going to need to be able to understand how to work with the language models.
One of the things that we've there's a in that intro video, there's a video of you from 6 years ago, and you can see that the work has worn heavy on you and me, and the system should be twice as expensive, frankly. But one thing I would say is that I wouldn't say we were the pioneers, but we were very, very early in the space of starting to use video for professional development, and we learned a lot through that. We learned that it's really important to put your values up front and to have an open, honest conversation, and that's what we're trying to do now. That's what we're saying, like, this is something that really does need engagement. We've got our principles. Our principles are that we exist to support teachers to thrive and get better. That's what we do. But we know enough about this technology to know that it can be used in other ways as well.
I that it's now anything in the room is going to be used, us, or someone else, or other systems. So, is there anyone up in the room that knows exactly how long we've got left of this session?
Oh, no
So,
idea.
I just want to check what time we're supposed to be finishing up.
No idea. Keep going, keep talking.
Yeah, just 20 minutes. Okay, well, shall we say that just an opportunity for that sort of group work for 10 and then 10 minutes to go back. So I think very much working on the themes that we were just talking about. What's excited you about the things that we talked about, both in terms of Lena's story, the big picture of where it could go, what we've shown you is where it's very shortly going to go, and generally sort of threats and opportunities. Take about 10 minutes, maybe if you could start off by picking somebody on your table who's going to be responsible for sort of feeding back, taking a few notes, take 10 minutes, and then
one thing I just want to point out, we're not going to launch that, the ability to build a prompt. We might pre-engineer and get some prompts that will bring some real expertise together that we will release. And then we're going to have our early access program where we're going to start inviting the community to engage, not only in that question of like how do we build these prompts better, but what are the implications. So just want to set the scene about that.
10 minutes.
How long we got to all that? What he was describing there, which would be really, really useful and really great in terms of scaling up to trust or an AI teacher that's going to stand there in front of the class, provide the feedback to kids and treat it all into the system.
I like to think, maybe it's really naive, that AI, as that's described, creates the humans in the room with the capacity to do that and really maximise this stuff.
Well, it isn't the type of that, it's about scalability for me. So the work that I do across the schools and the trust is like, well, how do we put that model in? Yes, you can train coaches, but then it's about the time that they've got to release to be able to do that. Yes, you can look at team coaching, but that doesn't always give you the detail that's needed for those individuals. But with that, it could scale it if you've got those expert coaches are the ones putting in the prompts and the research that it's based on. I think the concern is that there will be schools and settings that will always be negatively ideas. And we have that now already, don't we? That schools take a strategy and use it to hand out teachers or to reduce the autonomy.
But if you think about like the role of a coach in the scenario I was just describing, I think I completely agree with you to scale it out. And actually, quite often when you're thinking about coaching, you're not always thinking about like the best coaches, you're thinking about controlling for the least effective coaches that you've got across schools. And so if you've got AI doing like almost like first line coaching, what your strong coaches can do is they can look at the data that's coming across and then put on a dish like, okay, actually I can see there's a pattern emerging here in X.
Yeah, like
and
X
I can
percentage of
develop
teachers across the trust, I need this bit of support.
So I can then target my support, maybe do a session, get them together to talk about in a sense, make around an idea and actually build on it, as opposed to then having to do all of the first line stuff and never having time to be strategic and see patterns and actually move.
Because what that doesn't do is have an emotional response, does it? So like we all work with people who I know of staff that I wouldn't necessarily, I don't want to say trust, but I wouldn't trust to go into some classrooms because of the nature of the relationship they have with that person, how they've worked with them over many, many years. They will automatically go in with a negative mindset about how they're going to view that person's teaching, and whereas that doesn't have that emotional response.
The removal of
And
bias.
actually, I think it could educate from the perspective, as you said, those coaches who aren't as strong as others. Just reading that feedback would give a different dialogue to some of your coaches who you wouldn't necessarily want to team up in particular areas or.
Also, just
Going in.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yes, yeah. Just thinking.
But also, there's an access to PD thing. If I know I'm getting feedback from a person who's not a real person, I might be more willing to engage with it because I feel like someone's not seeing me and judging me, and I might make a mistake in front of them.
That might be a generational thing as well. So for potentially younger teachers who need to engage in, maybe that's something that they find really useful. Some of the older teachers may not find that as easy to engage with.
Because even getting teachers to be willing to watch themselves back from being recorded, even that first stage is really tricky. Horrible. Yes, exactly.
Hello, it's so funny, it works in the classroom, it's very rarely in any context. Really free form now, I just want to start sharing some of the conversations that have been happening on each table, and start trying to kind of summarise, the different perspectives, and if there are any, contradictory perspectives that we could explore further fruitfully. Maybe we could just start at the back. Is anyone just kind of summarise some of the sort of topics of conversation that you were touching on?
We were talking a bit about, I guess, the scalability and the logistics of AI actually being a real positive for this. So some of our roles are supporting teaching and learning across multiple settings. And actually just sometimes the logistics of arranging times to go and meet and reflect together and share together across central schools can be a bit of a logistical nightmare, whereas actually incorporating the AI and people following the pathway using the AI with then a senior member of staff reflecting at the end of that process on what they've learned through the AI and looking at the impacts of the pathways would be a real positive.
Any sort of like concerns or challenges come through in your conversations?
My role's going to be redundant. It's at the moment, my role is working to support teachers and teacher development. AI is going to take a lot of this AI program could potentially take a lot of the lead with that. I just think roles are going to need to adapt. So as I said, rather than reflecting on each individual lesson and me guiding, me taking part in that coaching process, it's going to be looking at maybe evaluating the end of the pathway with the teacher on
reflection process.
So it's just going to be adapting roles to fit with this.
It's really interesting. I mean, obviously, sort of like the Industrial Revolution, but in the white collar space in the US parlance, right? I mean, think of all of the jobs that are actually I would argue that in education is probably at least now the most immune to that because of I don't shoot the messenger, but because of the childcare aspect of in the longer term, the fact that kids need to be somewhere, and then obviously the fact that it's just an intensely human experience anyway, that I think is necessary. But there are obviously huge implications for other professions to consider.
I just wanted to come in on that point because I think it's really important when you talk about teachers taking control of this conversation and framing it for the sector. Let's make sure that nobody is seeing it as a headcount thing, and actually what it's doing is maybe creating some capacity to do some of the frontline coaching work, so that those people that work at teacher development can be more strategic and spend their time thinking about patterns and building on that kind of first layer in this model as an example. But I think that's a really important conversation to make because learning is a human and an emotional experience. It's not something that can just be done with a computer or with a robot. And so it's about directing that human capacity where it can add most value and reducing some of the human capacity in areas where maybe technology can do as good better job.
It's an interesting reflection on it. It's not the same, but like in some of the large ITT programs that we've engaged with, they've replaced quite a few of their sort of site visits with video. But what that hasn't meant that they've spent less time on the road. They've just spent more time with the people who need it most. Just an interesting perspective, like because they were able to get a holistic view. They're able to zone in and actually like spend the quality time with the people who benefit from this. So it's a sort of similar vibe. On this table in the middle, what was the sort of main sort of take homes from your conversations? Wide ranging.
Mind bending. Lots of really interesting ideas. And we started off talking about some of the potential issues we can see with the system we're developing being text-based and in different settings, send schools, things like non-verbal communication we talked about, so that was a really important area.
One thing to say is that's they're already changing. I mean, like ChatGPT 4 Turbo, whatever, can process images, and it will be processing the video analysis as well. It's a speed of change is extraordinary. So but you're right. I mean, text inherently misses things. Any other sort of reflection?
We're off a bit of a tangent, sorry.
That's really anyone sort of willing to sort of summarise the conversations that you're having?
We've had a few people that work in trusts talking about regions where maybe they're like isolated to primary schools, where there maybe people don't have the same access to expertise and high quality coaching, and it might help to sort of level the playing field for some of those settings. We talked about that as an advantage. That wasn't we talked about loads of things.
I think that the thought of AI through an equity lens before was interesting.
The amount of information that you can get from the system that would be really helpful to heads or trust leads or whatever about what's going on. There's a point made over here around what was going on across your organisation, so that you can actually then properly plan strategic delivery of CPLD on a variety of different areas where you can see commonality in issues they've got. So there was that opportunity to do things like that with it. But there was quite a lot of this could do absolutely everything, and I'm just glad I'm retiring in 4.5 years.
Well, on that equity point, we were talking about whether some teachers might feel more receptive to taking feedback from an AI than from another person if they deem that person to be biased or have certain biases against them.
Can we do a survey quickly? So, if you have, who'd rather have feedback from a person or an AI?
Depends on the person.
Okay, it's an unknown person, somebody you don't know who it will be, versus someone you know but you don't know which one, versus AI, assuming that the feedback is of equal quality. So hands up for AI. Oh, that's amazing.
It's the equal quality, I'd go for a person.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's all. What was the other point? The other point where I might come and talk to you afterwards, actually, because it's long. So don't worry.
We also talked about our concerns, a very ethical conversation about, how it, versus that potential. And I think it's just important to have that balance in this space, that we see all the exciting opportunities, but actually all around the table we were like, yes, but also. So that was, it's reassuring, isn't it?
So I feel like we need another conference specifically on this issue. I think a broad thing, not just like Irish names, but we need to get more stakeholders into that conversation. A bit of claps as well, because they would want that. Fabulous conversations over here, I heard. Can we summarise just broad? Or was it too wide ranging?
We were just having a very professional disagreement about how far this should go, really, I think. So I was saying that the objective information that it can give in terms of the number of questions, who answered the questions and things like that, I think is invaluable. But I just think there's a responsibility to protect the profession in terms of teacher development, and what Sam was saying earlier about effective PD being about allowing agency and critical thinking of members of staff. If we're going as far as AI telling you what to say, or you said about, you know, Whisper being live in your ear during the lesson and possibly telling you to rephrase a question for a specific SEN need. I don't actually think that's going to lead to teacher development, and I think that's going to reduce the respect of the profession, because if somebody's just going to tell you what to say or tell you what to do, I don't think that's helpful. But I think the objective information paired with a human conversation about how you can change that to get better, I think would be invaluable.
And then that there was, so the very professional disagreement that was on the table was around.
I thought I'd swept over it.
It was around that kind of like, maybe you could.
Yeah, I was the person that, you know, had that disagreement, professional disagreement. But no, it felt to me like professional development in your pocket. Alerts, I've been told to move several times today by my wristwatch. But again, if you own the narrative, and if it was to tell me that I've been using not enough wait time, and it then told me that I told you that last week, and I'm telling you again, and I can switch it off, or actually, then I probably would have more agency, because I've been reminded, or felt that my wait time was perhaps reducing as a result. And then if it gave me a prompt and said, you've reduced your wait time, well done, and then I put it on my LinkedIn and share with everybody. So and with a background in sports science, you know, sport's been using data analysis and gathering data on professionals' sports performance for years just to eke out that 1%. I think perhaps that's kind of where we're going with this, and I'm quite excited about it.
Interesting, isn't it? The quick question for you: the question of those sort of like say that kind of bit type feedback. Do you think that would have be more beneficial to maybe kind of a novice teacher and less to a more experienced teacher, or is that actually irrelevant?
I don't think you can chalk it up to experience. I think that was kind of, it's about level, it's about the appropriateness to the person at that point and their development.
Yeah.
I think live coaching and that sort of thing is happening in schools now.
Yeah.
Back to the point about taking feedback from AI versus a human being. At the moment, there are schools up and down the country who are having, you know, a person in a high-vis jacket walk into their class, observe something, call it out and demonstrate, and you know, it's happening now in human-to-human interactions.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed is that you can't make it impolite. You honestly, obviously you build in some additional prompt engineering around like how you give feedback, for example, for an education context, but it's painfully respectful. At all times, even if you tell it.
Even if you're rude to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But to me, a human being will always have a more awareness of the context than an AI ever would. So in terms of the live coaching or whatever, even a senior leader who hasn't seen you teach that much will walk into your room and know that Johnny's misbehaving because there was a domestic violence incident last night, and actually Tom over there has got 3 SEN needs, and this is good behaviour for Tom, and Sarah's missed 3 lessons, and that's why she asked that question, and the behaviour is the reason the teachers stood where they are. And I just don't think we're there yet for AI to replace that human in terms of, even in terms of live coaching though, even in terms of do this, I just don't think until that awareness of the context, and somebody said it before about understanding and being able to see non-verbal cues. I just don't think at that point, we're not there yet, but I think the objective statistics.
Well, I was just going to say that. So in terms of just to let you know where, just to round up where we're sort of kind of going with it, and grab me at lunch, give me some feedback on this. Our thought was that we would build those tools, those ones like standardised frequency of open questions, frequency of closed, but those type sort of objective measures, and that we would release those to everybody, and that we would then do this the AI open access program with a select number of schools under a different set of contractual responsibilities, as in creating certain things you won't be doing with this to start off with. And then looking at kind of refining these things, but also trying to engage staff in answering some of these ethical questions, some of these application questions. So it's not just like make the tool better, but like where does it work and why? And start trying to get that conversation going. But one thing I would say is that the next iteration of what actually gets released might be more around providing prompts to not prompts, but like key information to a coach. So like say someone share a video, it might get shared, and when it arrives, there might be a couple of time notes already on the timeline saying point of interest. And it gives you the opportunity to dig in as a professional without making judgments or anything else, just saying, that was interesting. That might be one of them.
Could it do a summary as well, where it said, you know, number of questions asked, 48, open 12, like, you know, that'd be good as well.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Right, well, that was really rich and fascinating. Thank you.